Chapter 1. Find and be found. Burning. A surge of confidence, with a taint of carefree attitude, is all it took to get me up and running through the remains of what Equestria used to be. I honestly don't recall how long it's been since I've escaped that prison, known to wastelanders as Stable 29. Still, I was on my way trying to fix this somehow. I get that a single pony can only do so much, but I just couldn't leave the memories of friendship, of harmony, sweet and beautiful nature be just gone by. No, not on my watch. It does help that I don't have an expiration date, but that by no way means that this task is a freebie. During my rather extensive travels, I've covered Celestia knows how much ground of this devastated landscape. Despite all of that, being the pony of nature, me getting lost are words that don't appear in any dictionary. I was moving through one of the drier parts of this world, a desert in this particular instance, a fair big distance north of New Appaloosa, seeing if I could find something interesting. What would really make my story would be some pony to become friends with, but it doesn't help if you're an introvert who, for others at this time, probably seems more like an old-timer from ages ago. I turned around and looked at myself. This place made my coat particularly dusty, and traveling through here was demanding in terms of stamina. That being said, my physique was always far from being my forte, but it was I suppose. The clouds were very persistent nowadays, giving this desert a truly desolate atmosphere, almost like a movie. I wish it were a movie, but wish thinking don't work like that. Not anymore it does. Night was slowly crawling through the sandy plains, and so the need for a little bit of nap arose. Quite a luxury demand nowadays, but a pony's gotta do what he's gotta do. It did have some sort of thrill being in the desert by yourself. You could be silly, wiggle your hooves around like you're about to shake it to some sick beat, and there weren't any ponies staring or judging. I kept trotting for a few more minutes. Yawns came as interval reminders, demanding that I sleep. Eventually I'd notice what looked like a few buildings in the distance. I got closer to inspect them further, to see if they were sleepy pony friendly. I carefully scanned those old deserted buildings for any hints inhabitants tend to leave. Better be careful and paranoid than sorry. No lights, broken windows, and absolute silence. Some buildings were 2 stories tall, the tallest around, perfect to hide in for a night for a sleepy stallion like this one, with extra precaution and measures taken, of course. I chose a red, run-down, old wooden house amongst them to be the one. I crept near the walls of the building, looking about at the other buildings for any activities, but I couldn't make out anything suspicious. The front door was not in its best shape, but enough to provide some sort of security. I quickly trotted inside and closed the door behind me, and started to look for scavengeables while at it, as well as coming up with a way to make the house smart in a way. I may not have ever been the strongest, but when it came to thinking, this stallion sure was an egghead in his own right. More street smart than book smart, though, but still. The bottom floor consisted of a small parlor and 2 rooms, plus a stairwell leading upwards. I went over towards what seemed to be the remains of a kitchen, and saw a few old things. There were a few empty cans, empty bottles of what seemed to be sparkle colas. Boy, am I wishing for some. There were a few cupboards and drawers. I checked behind them by pulling them out. Some ponies have always thought those would make good hiding spots, Well, that is only true until this pony comes around. I pulled them out, one after another, using my magic and carefully bringing them out. I started smiling when I saw a little pouch behind one of them. I eagerly levitated it towards me and opened the little string that was keeping the little pouch of whatever it seemed to be closed, and opened it and found 15 caps. Those were pretty handy. I quickly took them and slipped them into my saddlebag. I don't know who the owners of these were, or if they'd come back, but judging by what I saw, they must have been long gone. And it might be amazing if they were alive, actually. I levitated the cans that I found towards the kitchen door, which actually opened both ways. I stacked the cans behind the door so that they were about a breeze away from falling. The other room here was just plain empty. Things were stolen, certainly. At least they were polite enough to leave the door. The kitchen door was intact as well. Good thing I'd already been given the tools to turn both of those doors into noisemakers. I trotted up the stairs. They were squeaky. I started smiling again and started to trot about to make it squeak and thinking of a song I heard once and making them squeak to a beat for a lot longer than I'd like to admit, but you gotta have a little fun too, even in times like these. Settled down and most certainly calm, cool, and collected. That's what I thought I was. Anyway, I started looking around the top floor, and if Pegasi tried finding someone in here, they'd start from top to bottom, with a pony-sized thud to be heard if someone tried to land here. So this floor seemed to be perfect for my night's stay. One of the rooms caught my eyes. It was an old bedroom. Even if the bed was way out of what I would call an ordinary and intact bed, it was interesting. There were pictures of some pony hanging just above it. A young colt, green mane, brown coat, and topaz-colored eyes made me think of family. Even memories I've made centuries ago still seem to remain memories. I got that wallowing in pity might not be the best of choices, so I levitated something from my saddlebag. Yes, some would say it's organized worse than Counterlot is now, but well, they say it takes a genius to sort a mess. I rolled out a small and cozy woven and woolly blanket I'd purchased quite a while ago. I made sure to not sleep right in front of a window, but close enough to get an awesome view of nature. Even at night in this wasteland, it had some sort of beauty to it. I levitated another object from my saddlebag. A small, but adorable beyond words plushie of an animal. I curled up with it on my blanket and lay down using my hat as a semi-pillow and called it a day. I woke up from something downstairs. It was sweet daylight outside. Half awake, I started rubbing my eyes and instinctively started to pack my things in a rush.
Horse apples! Who the buck puts drawers on a goddamn door?
I heard angry masculine complaints from below, and couldn't help but grin a little bit, even at the expense of another pony.
Someone rigged this place!
I heard the same pony say. I got behind the door of the room I was in and camped down. To my surprise, no squeakiness from the stairs was heard, but it sounded like someone was leaving the house.
Screw this house! Let's clean it out!
I heard someone say from outside. While someone was giggling loudly, I tilted my head, unaware of what those dim-witted ponies were up to. A few moments later, the air started to smell like a chemically enhanced barbecue, if I had to guess. I was confused, to put it mildly. I noticed bright light shimmering from outside, brighter than usually. I crept towards the side of the house and peeked out the window. There was fire, flames. Whoever was out there wanted to spit roast me in here. The wooden house worked against me from this point forward. I peeked out of the window, barely sticking my head out. I got visual on two ponies at the corner of the house. One of them an earth pony stallion, brown coat, wearing some sort of armor, and the other was a mint-colored unicorn mare, levitating some sort of canister. If I had to make an educated guess, I would guess that the liquid used to set this fire came from in there. But I didn't have any time to make any more guesses. I had to move, and quick too. The walls were getting charcoaled on some of the areas of the inside. Time was running out. Teleporting, suddenly, could get me shot if I teleported down there. Plus I had a bone to pick out there with these savages, raiders, or whatever they were. I looked towards another room. A bathroom, with a small window leading out to the back. The stairwell and parlor were a mess of fires, ready to end me in one of the more painful ways in the wastelands. But I stayed calm no matter what. It's what centuries of life do to a creature. I went into said bathroom. The air got warm, like on a cloudless day, but well, with clouds. I looked out the window. No pony there. Perfect. I teleported down there and tried keeping quiet, but I knew standing next to a burning building was amongst the more careless things one could do in these lands. I brushed one of my fronts across my mane, glad to have lived for the moment. I looked towards the front, peeking out from behind the back, and noticed the ponies from before, plus a second taller earth pony, armed with a rifle, aiming at the front of the building. What an old trick. No one ever leaves through the front. Ever. Still, I wanted to teach those ruffians a lesson or two about how I thought ponies should be treated. But killing ponies was not some level I dropped down to. But then again, death had moved down in terms of worse things that could happen to a pony in this place. My horn started to glow as I aimed my telekinesis towards an object. Huh, what the? The earth pony watched as the canister held by the unicorn mare was flung out of her own grasp, right behind her. They all turned towards the empty container, as expected. My horn once again started to glow, ready to use some of the more harmful magic I'd acquired during my travels in the wastelands, this spell being very natural in a way. Step by step, I snuck towards the front. Those ponies who had come to roast me were looking at the canister, then upwards towards buildings, expecting someone there. Fools. Seconds later, the stallion with his rifle shrieked as much as he could, dropping the rifle from his mouth, twitching, his body steaming. He seemed kind of paralyzed and certainly not being able to move. But then again, getting hit with a powerful zap of electricity isn't something any pony would recover from so quickly. I learned this one back when it was trapped in the stables. The other two turned to their companion, and after a moment or so they realized that this blue colt was ruining this party as much as he could. That being said, I made sure to not overdo it when hitting the unsuspecting pony, who was by far the most heavily armed of the bunch. I repeated the spell just as the unicorn was about to levitate the dropped rifle, but I can't blame her for the reaction. I mean, how would you react to whatever it was that I was about to do? A bright and swiftly cast second shock of electricity rippled right through her whole body before she could gather herself, let alone take aim at me. She was panting, laying there, whimpering. The earth pony's spiked armor was gasping and gulped, staring at me. Shit, the brown colt muttered, laying down, looking up to me, shocked in more than one way. I could see it in his eyes. Fear, the feelings of someone fearing impending doom. His spiky friend stared at me still. Why, for Celestia's sake, does it have to come to hunting for other ponies like savages? I stared back at them. The unicorn looked up at me, confused, and surprised to be alive, as it seemed, from that expression of hers. The brown stud looked at me.
Finish us already.
I shook my head. What were you thinking of doing with me anyway? I opened my bag, getting something from there, while making sure to watch that rifle of theirs.
Money. The boss wants money from losers like you.
The unicorn mare was trying to get on her hooves, but struggled to do so. I had a clear message to give her. Sometimes you need to roughly shake someone to make them listen. Well, I prefer being nice and caring to every pony, mind you. I floated out a few healing potions of mine, the last ones that I had, and helped her to one of them. The other two were gasping, like they'd seen their first heartwarming eve ever, and I didn't take too long to treat the other two as well with my potions until they were used up.
Why are you doing this?
The one I spared looked at me. Since when does taking care for another pony need any reason? I grinned at him, smiling a little bit warmly as I could, despite the situation. He tried to say something, but seemed at loss of words. He knew I was right, but he was also amazed and speechless in multiple ways. I just did what I thought was right, giving him the pre-war equestrian way of things. Now, you go back and tell your boss and tell them the next ponies chasing me are going to experience just what I can do when I'm not holding back on any pony. I broke mid-sentence and stared at them as they were laying down and looking up at me, still in confusion as to what was happening. Or you can think about yourself and start fighting for pony kind. The after effects of the shocks were dying out. The pony who got hit first was sitting on his hinds and staring at me. If you decide you want to change this place, follow me behind New Appaloosa's train station, and make sure you're not wearing Raider's clothes. I bowed down and, with a bit of focus, teleported a pretty solid distance towards New Appaloosa, which was my initial distance that I wanted to go in the first place. Which was my initial destination anyway. I was trotting through the small alleys of the infamous town, but I've always been more of a nomad to these lands more than anything else, just like in the good old days. It was pretty busy during the day here, ponies trotting about, merchants were selling things. Sometimes the ponies got together for some cider and fun. I always thought so, at least. I looked at the ponies I saw, trying to see what they felt, what was going on their inside. I really wanted to socialize a little, but something on the inside always managed to stop me somehow. My hooves carried me behind the rail yard, where I'd left something a few days back. It was a shop in disguise. A royal blue painted pillar, which also happened to be the color as my very own coat, was standing in the center, with a white orb placed on top of it. And behind it all was a giant wooden board, which had a rough map of the wastelands spread on top of it. There was a grid drawn onto it as well. The map itself took quite a few years to make, but nonetheless it's fairly accurate. To the right was a small pipe leading underground. It was working like a little coin slot, if you may. I cast a spark of magic onto said orb, and it started to sparkle. Tell the orb where you wish. It is active when it glows. Was written on a sign I nailed underneath said map, giving instructions to ponies. But that was only half the magic. There's always more that meets the eye. There was a very, very heavy crate behind a barn near said pillar, which was covering a trapdoor leading underground. You would only know this was here if you were centuries old like I am. I levitated the so-called gatekeeper out of the way and slipped inside, and then very gently placed it back onto the door, covering it, stealthily and innocently as well. Inside was the other end of the pipe for caps, and a temporary shelter of mine, It was untouched. My belongings were still there. I sat down on my mattress. Yep, comfort during my sleep was always big for me. And looked up. The orb on the pillar was stuck on a small piece of glass, through which I could look up from down here, so I could tell if some pony was standing next to it. The final piece of the shop were hidden speakers coupled up with a microphone down here, so I could communicate with them without ever being seen. I gazed at some of the books I stored down here. They were gems of the past. Some of them were spell books, others were facts that I'd written down myself. After all, knowledge is key. I grabbed one where I noted geographical landmarks I'd found throughout my travels, and decided to write a small paragraph about the earlier discovered abandoned buildings in the desert. I might thoroughly loot the place next time I'm there, and when I'm not about to fall asleep. Barn buildings. North of New Appaloosa. Possibly slavers there. Buildings require looting, and hideout of slavers must be found. I wrote down using ink, and using one of my feathers, which, thanks to my wings, I always had plenty to go about. Meanwhile, I kept an eye on the orb, and held a copy of my map at the ready. If someone came, I'd teleport them, wherever they wanted to be. I just had to make sure I had enough to drink down here to stay sharp. It took some minutes until a pony showed up, eventually. But after a while, a bright yellow earth pony mare with what looked like bronze mane got close. "Ooh, it's active again." I overheard words of hers before she gazed at the map. Meanwhile, I got close to the mic, ready to speak in a very deep and mysterious tone. You should know I'm great at changing my voice.
Orb, I'd like to go to 10H, please.
I looked down to my map. It was a place known as Hope, not far from Old Ponyville. I cleared my throat and got to the mic and unmuted it. "Yes, you may. Insert the caps into the pipe and you will be sent there." I tried sounding like a really stern royal guard. The prices were on a list next to the map, and based on distance from this place.
Okay, thank you.
She inserted the caps into the pipe, and I counted them, in my head, of course. 150 caps. Sweet. The poor mare seemed rather intrigued by the strange talking and glowing ball. "Get ready and hold still." I closed my eyes and focused on the map, and on an object that I remember from New Hope. It was a whole bunch of old trees that I remembered being there, but after a few moments, I had focused enough and released a strong teleportation spell, sending the yellow mare right there. And after a while, pony after pony after pony came. And of course, me being me, I took notes of the different ponies who came, what they looked like, what they seemed to feel, and so on. I loved to learn about every pony. So different and yet alike in a way. After a few hours, I tallied a total of 4 teleports only, but that was a successful day in my book. I got to help ponies with my magic, and got a few caps from it as well. I was growing hungry just when I noticed another pony, trotting towards the pillar. Wait, what was that? I laid my book down, took a closer look. A mint-colored coated and very familiar-looking unicorn mare. The mint-colored unicorn mare from before. Covered in bruises, panting heavily. I never hesitate helping ponyfolk, no matter what, who they may be, and teleported up there quick as my magic let me. She looked at me in relief.